Hello and welcome to Rare Cuts Media Society, the podcast that looks at hidden media gems where things just happen. What the hell? With your host, as always, I'm Andrew Jagoda, and with me we've got Rob Lachik. How are you today, Rob?
Oh, I'm doing very well. I am ready to learn the proper way to say ho ho ho.
Yes, it's December here, so when you're listening to this, hopefully it makes sense that we're talking about Christmas. All right, and we've got Eric Hathorn. How are you today, Eric?
I'm pretty good, and I'm glad we are talking about Christmas. And I'm going to say that even if you're listening to this not in December and in May, you could still enjoy Christmas. Why not?
Why not? It's all year. Then Mike Ross, how are you today?
I'm good, and I think tonight's pick is a great choice because today, of all days, is St. Nicholas Day. So this is perfect timing.
There we go. And with that, I'll get right into it. We're continuing our arc of holidays for the year. And of course, it's Christmas time. So we've gone with Terry Pratchett's Hogfather, the miniseries version based on the novel of the same name. So we'll go right ahead and get into a little background. So Hogfather, the miniseries, was from 2006. And the novel is the 20th Discworld novel from 1996. For those that aren't familiar, Discworld is a series of comical fantasy novels that parodies the real world as well as other fantasy creations such as Lord of the Rings, for example. Running from 1983 to 2015, the series has had many different focuses, but with Christmas right around the corner, Hogfather is the perfect book. So, in Discworld, there's no Christmas or Santa Claus. Instead, on December 32nd, Hogswatch night is celebrated with children eagerly awaiting presents from the Hog Father. The new year begins the next day on Hogswatch Day. However, in the novel and miniseries, Death discovers that the auditors of reality are attempting to eliminate the Hog Father with the help of an assassin named Teatime in an attempt to make humans more controllable and predictable. Rather than let that happen, Death takes on the guise of the Hog Father in order to maintain belief while his granddaughter Susan tries to stop Teatime. So with that, let's take a moment here to see how all of you guys felt about Hogfather. Did you guys like the show? Was it too confusing? Was there anything that should have been cleared up with narration for the casual viewer? Because honestly, I've been reading Terry Pratchett in Discworld for over 20 years. So for me to look at it, I know everything that's going on. It's hard for me to kind of step away and say, well, what's everybody going to get from this? Because it's just stuck in my head. So, go ahead, tell me what didn't make sense. If it did make sense, you guys tell me.
So I'm not familiar with Terry Pratchett. I've heard the name, but I'm not a reader, so I never read any of his stories. Wasn't familiar with Discworld. So this was completely new to me and fresh, and I really enjoyed this. I mean, it was a lot of fun. The confusing parts mostly, it was mostly with the wizards, but I think that was intentional. And so at first I wasn't understanding it. I was like, what? I feel like I'm drunk or something watching this because I don't understand these wizards. And then as you get further into it, you suddenly be like, oh, I see what's going on here. And I did the extra credit too, so I listened to the audiobook of the Hog Father, and I think that helped too for me to understand the wizarding folk a little bit better.
Yeah, the wizards. There's whole books just about wizards, and it's all confusion. they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I wanted to, as this is my kind of Discworld and Hogfather and like all that. Like I've wanted to get into reading these, but I know there are so many. So it's one of those things where I'm like, where do I start being a completist? I don't know where I want to start, because I'm sure this is one of those where like some people are like, oh, start at the beginning and read them in order, and other people are like, no, read this first or that first and it'll get you into it and all that kind of things. And I know like my main source of knowing about Discworld is you, Andrew, so of course that's where this would come to. And like what I knew about Discworld comes from just general like trying to skirt around it to learn a little bit about it and things that I've learned from you. But I think like this was it was a nice way to like be introduced to it. And as far as like things being confusing, I think there's things that I don't know that I don't know. So there's like, I'm sure there was stuff that like, if I knew more about Discworld, or like Mike had read the book and not just watched the miniseries, I would have like understood more, but it just was like over my head because I didn't know what I didn't know. But I felt like it was easy enough to jump into the story just knowing a very little bit about Discworld, which actually what I knew about Discworld was pretty much explained in the little intro where they showed the turtle with the elephants and then the disc world on the backs there. And it was like, that's what I knew about it. And I knew that it was like fantasy satire. And then that was like, okay, now that's everything I know about it. And we got into the story. The one thing I found confusing was not necessarily about the story itself, but it was why this was originally a 2-part miniseries, but where I watched it on Peacock, they decided to divide it into 3 parts. And I was like, wait, like, because when they ended it, the first part, I was like, okay, that's like a natural stopping point, I guess. Yeah. And then they like started the second episode, and it was like only like 5-10 minutes in. I felt like they were starting it over. Maybe it was like 15 minutes in. They're like starting the whole thing over again. I was like, just wait, what? Oh yeah, it used to be 2 parts. So what was that? That confused me.
Yeah, see, that kind of threw me too, because I'm used to watching some shows that they have maybe a later title card sometimes. And I was like, oh, okay, that seems really late, but okay. And then how the second episode ends with, I think it's Susan finally going into the Tooth Fairy's castle. Mm-hmm. That's where it ends, and it just like fades out, and it's like over. And it's like, that's quite the cliffhanger there.
Yeah, it's something I wanted to bring up, and I'm glad you did, because when I watched it when it originally aired here in America on Ion.
Nice.
I think that's channel, or at least it was channel 38 here, but anyway. So it was the 2-part. It was, the way that they intended it. And then I had bought the DVD when it came out that year, and again 2 parts. And then when I was telling you guys, hey, I think I'm going to pick this miniseries thing, it's only 2 episodes, and then of course I go on Peacock and I go, 3. Why is it 3? But I think it was just literally somebody at NBC Universal looked at it, said it's 3 hours long. Okay, just make it an hour, and they didn't even know what it was. Because the middle of episode 2, you're getting the whole intro over again.
It was like, those blasted AIs. It was those blasted AIs. Just
yeah, it's very weird. What about you, Rob?
So I initially, when I started watching it, well, even before I get into that, I am not familiar with the Discworld at all. I was totally thrown into this just by this film or TV show or miniseries, whatever we're going to call it. So going into it and the start of it, I will say I was a bit confused, even just kind of getting the lay of the land of the characters and who they were, how they were connected, like Death and Susan. That took a hot minute for me to really kind of get. But once I kind of got the lay of the land, I was thoroughly entertained for the rest of the series. I really, really enjoyed this. I mean, it was silly, goofy, full of little kind of jokes. If you blinked, you missed it type of things, which I thoroughly appreciate. So I was thoroughly entertained by it.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Because like I said, for me, it's just natural at this point. So I had no idea how you guys would respond to it. The funny thing is that when I started reading it, I didn't start at the beginning. Like Eric, you were mentioning, I probably should have. But I just kind of at the time was like, oh, this one book, Reaper Man, sounds funny. It's one of the death novels. And I just kind of said, oh, that seems like a funny one. I think I'll start with that. And it was probably like the 15th book or something. But it kind of, in a way, reading it that way, not starting with the beginning, kind of introduces you to Terry Pratchett's style, because he will just kind of jump all over the place. And you can start at the beginning, sure, but if you really, are going to read it, you can start anywhere. It can get a little confusing at parts, and if you go back and read again the other books, then it'll clear it up. But yeah, you could do it any way you want. So with that, to the Discworld aficionado, it's well known that Terry Pratchett adaptations are very largely accurate to the source novels. And Hogfather is no exception. It cuts out very little, except some of the stuff with the death of rats, but it's not that important. But also in his novels, Pratchett, he doesn't use chapters. A couple of times he does, but mostly he doesn't use them. And instead he jumps around a lot, frequently with line breaks, kind of like jump cuts in the show, which obviously were used here. But it also helps cut down on unnecessary dialogue and makes the jokes stand out more. So I'm interested to see, did you guys feel like any of that perspective changing? Was it too much? I know you guys weren't like super confused by the show, but did it seem like it took anything away, or did you feel it was natural?
I feel like it's like a lot of different series that you watch where you have a lot of characters, a lot of different character development taking place simultaneously. Mm-hmm. And you end up having your favorite characters or your favorite story arcs that are working their way through. And so for me, anytime the wizards would come back on screen, I'm like, oh, it's like, I don't understand your story yet. I don't understand your connection to all of this, really. And I'd rather just focus on the other characters in play. So in that sense, the jumping around, it would like take me out, because I didn't want to go back to the wizards. But now I feel like after watching it all the way through, listening to the audiobook, I have a greater appreciation for the characters, and I could see myself enjoying those parts more now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, even though I have trouble distancing myself, I was watching it, and I kind of, when they first showed the wizards, I kind of said, you know what, this might be kind of confusing to people, because the wizards, the way that they just show up in the miniseries version anyway, it's like, who what are they doing?
Yeah
it's very, to me it's kind of like, wow, that's kind of striking.
Is it the first scene where he's taking a shower, or one of the wizards is taking a shower?
It's one of the first ones.
Yeah.
I was confused by that. I even thought that was, I was like, is that the Hog Father? I was a little confused at that point.
I will say, I thought that too. I was thinking that he might secretly be like, he didn't know he was the Hog. I had that thought in my head. So I'm with you there too, Rob. But I thought I knew the wizards meant something, but I don't necessarily think I was, I don't think I skipped a beat on the wizards. The wizards, because I think when they set the thing up, they like showed that like the wizarding school was like the big it's a college town, essentially. I'm going to call it a college town because that's like the center of the city is this wizarding school. So like, I was like, okay, if it's the center of the city and they're showing these guys, they got to be important for something. And then my brain, I think, just like accepted their weird quirkiness as character development and like exposition of the story. Like we're starting this story. I know these guys are going to come into play later. They're just trying to show me how goofy they are. So I think I was able to, and that's where I go back to saying, I don't know what I didn't know, because I knew something was, but like, I didn't know anything about them, but I knew I was going to have to know about them in some way. And as far as like the perspective changes, I thought it did a good job of like, even though we had these vastly different like groups and storylines, because you kind of have, you have the wizards, you have the assassin group, you have Death, and you have Susan. Like at the beginning, they're all kind of like their own zones, but they do, you quickly realize that they're all related. So like as it's going, you're like getting it, they're all like coming together. They slowly start coming together, and then like they ultimately all super converge, and it it makes that, it kind of gives you that good payoff, and that how they all kind of mash up then throughout the story. But no, I thought I liked the cuts. I mean, the show itself has a very like British miniseries. You tell me this is a British miniseries, you don't have to, because I know it is, because it's got that vibe. I mean, other than the English accents, of course, but like the look of it, the feel of it, like it just kind of had that vibe, which I like. I like that. I watch a lot of good old PBS or the British shows on PBS. That's my jam. I love it. But like it had that vibe, and it was like, when you say that his writing does that, that makes me more excited to read a Terry Pratchett book, because it, like, if we talk about, okay, so like he spoofed like Tolkien and stuff like that, Lord of the Rings, and like reading the Lord of the Rings, I love the Lord of the Rings, don't get me wrong, but reading it is rough, because he's like talking about the side of a tree and like how this happened over the course of many give me some jump cuts. Yeah. Like, because that's another story with all these characters. I don't need the history of the tree for 17 pages. I just want the jump cuts. So like, that's exciting to me, because a lot of fantasy that I've tried to read, I can't get into it because of the world building. And that's just not my jam. But if this is the snappy style of Terry Pratchett, I think that's more my jam.
Yeah, it definitely is, because when you read it, it's like you could have a section that's half of a page, and then you get a little break. So even if you're having trouble with like that whole, like, I need to absorb this information, there are a lot of breaks. Whereas, some of those Lord of the Rings books, you could have a chapter that goes on for 25 pages, and you're kind of like, I need to finish this chapter. But he's talking about a guy in the woods, and it's going on, and I don't know why it matters. But with Terry Pratchett, every little character that, even if it just appears for half of a page, somehow ties into that final, plot knot, or whatever you want to call it, that he makes with all of those different storylines. So, with that, I mean, too, I think maybe even that's why NBC Universal cut it into 3 hours, because maybe they wanted it to be more like, people, they don't want these longer shows. They want something shorter. So can't we cut it a little more?
And I wonder too, because I will tell you, I cut it even more. I think I watched the 3 episodes over the course of 4 nights, because the amount of time we get to watch. So this could have been what NBC was trying to do, because the amount of time that we get to watch a movie, I don't think at home recently I have watched a movie in one sitting. Mm-hmm. We have normally gotten too tired and almost fallen asleep and had to pause it and then say, we'll watch the rest tomorrow.
And then
And they
get
kind of
back
did
to
that
it.
for us. What's that?
And then never get back to it.
That happens. It has to be
Yeah.
good enough to make us want to come back to it. But I will say the Hogfather was good enough to, like, I was looking forward to watching the next installment, and I was always looking forward to, I was like, I kind of wish there was more when I finished. Personally, at least that's where I was going with that.
Good. So with that, I obviously Discworld, like we said, Terry Pratchett, he's done a lot of jokes, a lot of parodies, a lot of satire. 41 novels. You get a whole lot of jokes. So I'm just wondering, what were your favorite moments or jokes from the show?
I will say my favorite was kind of early on when Albert, which I don't know the relationship to Death, but Albert was teaching Death the proper way of saying ho ho ho, and then explaining it needs to sound like you're, excuse my language, pissing brandy and crapping plum pudding. I definitely laughed out loud when I heard that. I
wrote that in my notes too. I wrote that quote down in my notes.
I'm laughing just thinking about it.
For me, it was definitely. I have a. I have the really dry sense of humor, so I really appreciated quite a bit of the humor here, and specifically when they're Albert and Death are about to go on their way, and Death says, "Let's get out there and slay them." That was a tune.
Yeah, there's like a whole thing in the arc of Death novels about how he doesn't understand puns and how they're used. So it comes to a head there, basically.
Yeah, no, I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I thought so, like, going back to, like, you talking about the relationship between Death and because Death and Albert had the best, like, scenes. Like, when I'm gonna tell you, when I judged the book by its cover and I saw Death in the pictures like coming up, I was like, ugh, I don't know about this. Like, I didn't know that storyline was going to be the one that, like, had the most the best stuff going on, but it totally did. But I wrote down the first time I, like, saw the two of them, I was like, Death is Batman and Albert is Alfred, right? Is that what that's supposed to be? Because he had his, like, Bat cave and he had his, like, butler dude, and I was like, he's Batman. So in my opinion, that's how I started with it. Like, Death is Batman. Which makes me think, like, did they ever do a Batman Saves Christmas? Because, I mean, it's not too far off here. But so.
Batman Returns was at Christmas time, so
I mean, it kind of was, right?
Christmas with the Joker.
That was well. There is the Batman: The Long Halloween has a Christmas chapter. I'm trying to remember what happens in that, but that's kind of jokery. Yeah. But I think my favorite moment wasn't necessarily. I mean, there were a bunch of moments, but, like, I'm gonna give you the, like, overarching, like, my feelings on it. Like, I loved. So, like, this movie, this thing that we watched, this miniseries, kind of went through. Here's where I'll make my Disney connection. That thing that I love about Disney movies and that Walt Disney always wanted his movies to do, like when he would talk about, like, what he wanted out of, like, a Snow White kind of movie, is he wanted it to have, like, action adventure. He wanted it to have, like humor and heart. He wanted you to be scared. He wanted you to, like, all of it. He wanted you to kind of go through a range of emotions. And I feel like this kind of fantasy had that. There's a lot of humor in it. There's a lot of heart. There was, like, dark moments. I mean, the main character is Death. Well, one of the main characters. You had Susan, who was what's her name? Michelle Dockery. Michelle Dockery from Downton Abbey. I love my Downton Abbey. Michelle Dockery, and she was kind of like a Mary Poppins vampire hunter kind of character where she's like an au pair, but then goes and, like a nanny, and then she goes and like kills these monsters under the bed. Like, like there was just so many like cool little things like that. It was like, it gave me the kind of same vibe of like a dark Disney movie, but with the same kind of like, there was a family friendliness in the darkness that I really liked. And then I really loved the way that they like explained the mythology of the Hogswatch and like Hogswatch Eve or Hogswatch Night or whatever it was called, and how the Hog Father became, and how it's like changing of belief over time, and like getting into like the mythological part of it. Because I, for one, I love Christmas, but I also like, I'm always like, like Christmas comes from Yule, and there's like all these other things, and it's not just like Christmas isn't just like, oh, it's Jesus's birthday, because there's other history to it there too, to like why it's in December and the solstice, and it's like all of those things have shaped what Christmas. Coca-Cola has shaped what Christmas is to us today, and it's like all of those little things have changed it over time, right? Mm-hmm. And so then it's like that. I love kind of how they kind of explain that like evolution of belief over time, and like how that shaped Hogswatch, and like how it, like not having a Hog Father might have disastrous outcomes on whether or not the sun will come up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was one thing that I thought was interesting too in the book. They specifically bring up the fact that Santa, or the Hog Father, is wearing red and white, and Susan makes a comment of, I thought that was a rather recent development, and Death responds that no, it's just that we recently remembered that that's what it was. It's like, that's what mythology is.
We recently remembered. I like that.
Yeah. I got to bring up my favorite moment. It's another Albert and Death moment, because they're great together. But Albert says, "Never say die. That's our motto." And Death says, "I can't say it's ever been mine."
Yeah.
Death is a great character. If you ever are into more Discworld novels, I highly recommend the series with Death. Those books are just fantastic. Reaper Man is hilarious.
Now, can I ask you a question about that?
Yeah.
Because as a probable future reader of Terry Pratchett, mm-hmm. Now there's like death novels. This is going to be the part where I just ask Andrew a bunch of questions about Discworld. No, there's death. So there's death novels, and then you said there's like wizard novels, and there's like these like novels that center around a character group or person or whatever. Mm-hmm. It's not that different from something like the MCU, or like, we got a death movie, we got a wizards movie, we got Avengers. But so you get stuff like that. But are you able to just like read the death novels together and they make sense, or are there like things that happen in between that you would need to know?
For the most part, there's really nothing that you'd have to know for sure, because the way he writes, if there is something, he'll mention it like as an aside.
Okay.
So yeah, you could totally do that. It's kind of funny doing Hogfather with you guys, because it's, I think, the fourth death novel. So even then, like, you're getting into it and you're still not, that's not the start of the death stuff. Like, the whole explanation of how Susan is related to him comes from 1, 2, well, mostly 1 and 2. So it's kind of funny to be starting and be like, oh yeah, the Hogfather. But yeah, there's like, it's almost like each series is like, if you were watching, say, MCU.
Yeah.
If you just never watched the Hulk, like, who the Hulk is.
Can I say that?
But the Hulk is in other things. So, like, you could be reading the Death books and then the wizards appear. Well, you kind of get enough enough explanation that you're not going, well, what's the Arch Chancellor? Who is he? Like, you guys had a little trouble with the wizards, but not like to the point of, Hulk. What's that about?
Right. Which most people didn't watch that Hulk movie. Didn't. No.
True.
That's just me ragging on the Hulk.
Yeah. But yeah, it kind of gets that, like, it's its own series, but you get so much interspersed throughout everything else that it doesn't matter. So you could start wherever you like. I will say, if you start at the beginning is a lot of parody of like The Hobbit, Fellowship of the Ring, because it's very much like, this guy's going on an adventure through the world and he's never seen any of this stuff. So it's kind of like introducing him and the reader to the world. Funnily enough, another adaptation is of The Color of Magic, the first book, but mixes in the second book as well. And the star of it is the guy that plays Albert. What's his name? David Jason. So you kind of get a little like tie in there if you ever do watch it, which is also on Peacock, by the way. Color of Magic. Yes.
Go figure.
Yes. That and there's also Going Postal, though I'm not sure that if that one's on Peacock, but Going Postal is also a great adaptation of Terry Pratchett. And they're all three of those were done by the same director, the same people. So a lot of fun stuff to watch if you're into it.
Nice.
Yeah. So with that, it's kind of tradition here to talk about cast. We've already mentioned Michelle Dockery being from Downton Abbey. I mentioned David Jason. Mark Warren, who played Teotime, was also in Band of Brothers, which seems like kind of a big jump from the military to this fantasy. It's kind of weird. I don't think he did that same voice though in it. Don't think so.
What is that voice? Can we talk about that voice for a second?
It is Willy Wonka from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Johnny Depp. It came out the year before the series released. It is 100% that.
Because he's doing an American accent, but it's not just a straight up American accent. It's also, like you said, it's like Johnny Depp's. And I was like trying to figure out, and that's not what I thought in my head. And I can't remember who I thought it sounded like, but I'll go with that.
I even wrote it down because it's like the weird laugh he does at one point. I was like, oh my God, it's.
And both of them are sociopaths. So, no. So there you go.
And they're both willing to show death to children.
Ruin childhood in general.
And like jack up some teeth.
Especially the Tim Burton one where his father is a dentist. So there you go.
Right? Full circle.
So when it comes to Discworld and the adaptations that were done while Terry Pratchett was alive, because he died in 2015, I'd hate to see anything remade, especially with Hollywood getting involved. It would ruin everything. But we have a tradition here on Rare Cuts to talk about these kind of things. So if the worst happened and Hollywood took on Discworld, who do you think would get cast in Hogfather? I will start out by giving you my ideas just to get us rolling. Death, I think, should be Keith David. If you know Keith David's voice, that would be a really good voice for it. And if you're not familiar, when we do our future Roddy Piper movies, you're going to learn about Keith David.
Spoiler alert. No, have we announced that yet? No. Is that happening? No.
Mike, you don't seem very enthused by this.
Big, tall, African-American guy, really deep voice. I'm sure you've heard his voice in voiceover stuff. He's even done Darth Vader before. But
nice.
But I think he'd be great for Death. I think Susan, Jenna Ortega. she, she fits the role. I mean, it's Wednesday.
And it sounds like you're casting Tim Burton as the director.
But
if you put Jenna Ortega in that position.
I wanted to say my picks first because Mike brought it up. Tea Time, Wonka. He should be Timothy Chalamet. Different Wonka, I know, but that's who should be Tea Time. And then I thought maybe Albert could be Ian McKellen if he's still around at that point. So that's my idea. Anybody else got any?
I noticed someone was missing from your list.
Willem Dafoe can play whoever he wants. I'm not going to tell that man no anymore. If he wants to play Susan, he can play Susan.
Ooh, that'd be good. I don't have Willem Dafoe on my list. He doesn't belong in this movie. I found one.
You guys were going to put him in anything. I think, did y'all even find a spot for him in St. Elmo's Fire? No.
Oh, he'd be good at, yeah, we talked about that. What's his name? Kerbo?
What? But he should just be deaf. No. Go on.
So for Susan, I went with Emma Stone. I think that she'd do good at that role. And then for Death, if he were still alive, obviously James Earl Jones would be wonderful. But in lieu of that, I went with Ron Perlman. I think he could do a good job. Albert would be Danny DeVito. Tea Time, I picked Evan Peters from like American Horror Story, or you could go with Ben Skarsgård. I think he could have done that as well. And Hogfather would be my favorite Santa from Violet Night, David Harbour.
There you go. Not Arnold Schwarzenegger from Jingle All the Way.
I cannot get my family to watch Jingle All the Way.
Oh, my kids loved it.
And tried.
I just showed them it like 2 weeks ago. They loved it. Don't give them a choice. Just don't give them a choice.
The problem is I don't get a choice.
I had a similar pick for Tea Time as you, Mike. Bill Skarsgård would be like perfect. I mean, he's creepy, but like unassuming until he starts talking and doing things. Then he's really creepy.
Yeah,
and that's Bill Skarsgård's like wheelhouse. Now I took the Death and Albert kind of pair in a slightly different way, because I didn't look at them as like a single character or a character individually. I looked at them as it's kind of like, what would be the best buddy film combination to put them in? Because I would watch a film just about Death and Albert. Like,
I would too.
I mean, it was kind of the first episode. I would watch that. So, Mike, you brought up an interesting one. If Albert was Danny DeVito, Death would have to be Arnold. I would watch that.
Danny DeVito would watch that.
But like, I was thinking, even like other like just like what kind of good buddy, like already established like buddy characters could potentially fit there. I mean, a weird one, could you do like a Roy Munson and Ishmael? Like one's confused, one kind of knows the ropes, and one's telling him one way or the other. But that's the way I kind of was looking at it, just because I would totally watch a film of just them, and it was just being a buddy film. Nothing to do with Tea Time or trying to recover Hogfather and bring him back. I would just say, you know what, the Hogfather's gone. I'm taking over, and then Death just becomes Hogfather or just fills in his position.
Okay, another buddy would be Steve Buscemi as Albert. and Peter Stormare from Fargo as Death.
I thought you were gonna say, when you said Steve Buscemi and you're talking about a buddy movie, I thought you were gonna say an Adam Sandler as Death.
No, I wouldn't.
Because Steve Buscemi and Adam Sandler in in Billy Madison. I'm gonna go with that. No. Adam Sandler as Death. No, I'm not gonna go with that. That would be bad. We're gonna go with so I'm gonna go back to an idea, and I don't have everyone here, but I'll get there. If we do if we do say that this is the Discworld is ready for a cinematic universe treatment, I'm going to give my MCU Hogfather. You've got Josh Brolin as Death with the Thanos voice, right?
Yeah.
And then I would put Elizabeth Olsen in as Susan, because she could do that. The Scarlet Witch as Susan. I think she could handle that part. And then we're gonna go back through the Spider-Verse and pull out a good old Willem Dafoe as Tea Time. We're gonna put him in Tea Time. Could he do Tea Time?
Yeah.
Oh, sure he could.
Why didn't any of you put him in Tea Time? I think he could also be Death. There's a version of this where he's a bunch of the characters, but I'm going to put him in Tea Time.
We talked about that before, and I fully support. I want to see a film where Willem Dafoe plays every character, and the entire world is made up of Dafoes, kind of like John Malkovich. But
oh yeah,
the whole movie is like that.
Yeah. For sure.
Being Willem Dafoe.
I
Mike,
like
you
it.
need to produce and create this film.
It's a sequel. It's a sequel to yeah. No, but if I was going to actually put I would put Tom Hiddleston in Tia Time if I wasn't gonna use a Willem Dafoe, like a Loki style. Like, he doesn't have to play it the same way.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I would say. He doesn't have to play it exactly the same way, but I feel like he could have that jam. And then, of course,
you could do Jake Gyllenhaal as Tia Time.
You could do him.
He'd work
for
too.
sure. And that's what I'm saying. You don't have to necessarily play it the same way. I'm not going to rewrite it, but you don't have to play it the same way. So then I would just get a bunch of people. Like, you got wizards. If I'm doing this MCU, you might as well nod to the MCU. And like, you got wizards. Let's put Doctor Strange. Put Doctor Strange right in that wizard house, the one wizard who's like doing all the tech stuff. You just put like Robert Downey Jr. right there, and he's like making like arc reactors.
Where's
and
Wong
stuff.
fit in?
But I mean, he could be in there too. He could be in the wizard. There's so many wizards. How many wizards do you want? I got wizards for days. We could just make people wizards. But yeah, no, I'm doing that because then Disney can get the MCU going in the Hogfather.
Yes, Disney, go buy Discworld so that you can start making more productions. But please don't take our suggestions for actors, except for Willem Dafoe.
Schwarzenegger, bring it on. I'll watch that.
Now, as you say, you don't want this to be picked up and remade, but if someone, I'm gonna ask you this, because I don't necessarily think it's Disney. I don't know if it's Disney, but is there any production company out there that you think could revive a Discworld dealy do and make it actually viable as a fan?
I honestly think if they did, the only way it would be really successful would be if it was animated CG. And I could see Illumination figuring that out. I just think that they would try to make it too kiddie. So I don't know. I don't think that I want that.
Gotcha.
I love Discworld, but unless it's a Brit, well, maybe Aardman Studios. Wallace and
Oh, that would
Gromit.
be cool. That would be
I could
cool.
see them doing it. Maybe it would take a heck of a lot of work for them with that stop motion that they do, but
Ever.
I could see that because at least then it would be back in British hands, and it would be
2055.
much
I'd buy that. All right, I'm changing it. Wallace as Death, Gromit as Albert,
There you go.
the sheep as the wizards, the sheep from Shaun of the Sheep, and all that. The wizards.
There's a new Wallace and Gromit coming just as we're recording this. There's a new one in like a month or so. So,
Wow. Did the whole studio burn down, or did they just create everything
they
new?
rebuilt.
Insurance.
Just, Burned down for insurance.
It was on
purposes.
Eric. You wouldn't remember this. It was
I remember
on fire
this.
for insurance purposes.
Yes, I remember that. I don't know that I was there. I just heard that anecdote so many times.
Well, with that, I want to thank you all for joining me on this journey into this Discworld. If anyone out there is interested, please visit your local library, pick up a copy of any of his books. They're all hilarious. I know there's been a huge resurgence on him because of Good Omens, which he did with Neil Gaiman, and Amazon Prime did Good Omens 2 seasons now as we record this, with a third on the way. And Good Omens is fantastic as a series. A little dry as a book, but funny with Terry Pratchett's insights. And with that, I think we will be going on to our scoring round.
Yeah. We got to grade you on this
Yeah,
one.
you guys got to grade me on this one.
And I got it ready already here.
Who
I
wants,
had me at
who wants to kick us off, Eric?
I'm at the top of the scoreboard. So what, a little behind the scenes of Rare Cuts. When I make the scoreboard, I just erase whoever's name was in that slot last time and I fill it in with the other person. And then I figure that's going to mix us up eventually, right? It should.
Eventually.
Yeah, because like this time I erased Andrew's at the top and I put my name there. But then we'll erase Mike's name and put Andrew's there when Mike picks. So I think it'll shuffle. I think it'll mostly shuffle.
Yeah.
So anyways, all that boring behind the scenes information. Are you ready to get your score from me? Oh no, I went back. I hit the wrong button because I hit the wrong slide, but that's okay. Cause let's look at this real quick just to remember. It was a perfect, I meant to do that.
Yeah, right.
It was to recap, Rob had a total score of 38 points. And I had a total score of, or I should say Rob's pick, The Old Dark House, had a score of 38 points. And my pick, St. Elmos Fire, had a total score of 21 points. Because some people weren't thankful for 80s cinema. But you can't always be thankful on Thanksgiving. But it is the holiday season, the season of giving, you may say. And we're taking a look at the Hogfather. So for rarity, I only knew about the Hogfather and Terry Pratchett's work with Discworld mostly because of Andrew. So I can't say that I knew about it before this, even though I knew about it before this, because the source is the same. It's only Andrew. And I feel like in the United States, this is probably a little more obscure for us than it would be maybe in the UK where this was on TV, at least on like readily available on TV. For us, you said you could watch it on like some UHF channels and stuff, but he had to turn to the extra dial on the TV to watch it. No, that's old school.
And my black and white TV.
Right? And you had to go all the way around to UHF and then turn the other. So for rarity, I gave it a top 5 for rarity in my opinion. I felt like it hit that rarity stroke of where it wasn't so super rare that it was like too weird, but it was like that perfect rarity place for theme. I mean, it was total Christmas through and through, and it was a heartwarming Christmas story that had vibes from all. But But Hogswatch is Christmas as far as I'm concerned. So I gave it a 5 too, because it got me in the Christmas spirit. And I think you can tell where this is going, because I think this one is worthy of a perfect score from me, giving it 15. And this, I'm going to tell you why. If you want to get a perfect score from me in the future, it did that thing. So it did a few things. Overall, like for that enjoyment, is it gave me a journey. I like a movie that goes on a journey. If a movie takes place in like one setting for the whole thing, it bums me out, man. I love like a good old like 007 movie or something where they're like on location in 50 different places. And this had a lot of different places that we were visiting. It had a lot of characters that I liked with. I thought it didn't get too much because they all did come together. It's a heartwarming Christmas story, but it also had some darkness that wasn't too scary. It had memorable lines and fun and all that kind of stuff. And it had a familiar face. I love when a movie will have some familiar faces. And as far as, I love my Downton Abbey. So it had a familiar face in it. So it like had all the things. It like checked all my boxes as far as enjoyment goes. And I think that poured over into the other two also. And I was like, this is the one. This is the kind of thing. This and like Mannequin. This and like Mannequin would have been my only like perfect scores since the
you're
beginning.
giving Hogfather a bad name by coupling it with Mannequin.
No, Mannequin does the same stuff for me. But anyways, I'll give this one even more points because I wanted more of this. When Mannequin finished, they should have just broke the mold and never made another Mannequin movie. But unfortunately they did, and no one asked for it. I would ask for more Hogfather, like Discworld stuff. So I give it a perfect score.
I feel like doing the Wayne's World, we're not worthy kind of a.
I mean, it was good. It was good.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Jagoda, I think you're on track for a very high score.
Sweet.
So rarity, I could not agree more with Eric. It is rare. I didn't know what the Discworld was. I didn't know Death could be a benevolent character who liked humans, apparently, as he said later in the series. It was a 5 for rarity, just straight up. Theme, again, it was Christmas without being Christmas, if you will, like to a T, if that's possible, and it obviously is because he did it. Yeah, give it a 5. Now, enjoyment, this is probably the only thing, and you could argue, it's a 55 for rarity.
I got a click
blowing
type.
it out of the water. This would be maybe the only piece that I would say, and it's probably maybe just because of its rarity and kind of unique usage of the characters. At the beginning, I was a little lost. So I give it enjoyment of a 4, a very high 4, but that would probably be the only knock on it. It was just kind of being a little like, wait a second. I wasn't sure where things fit in at the beginning. I think you kind of mentioned that of like how the world is so big, and it's like, do you just already know about it when you're watching it? So I think that was maybe one a little bit downside, but once I got into it, I mean, it was great. So
yeah,
a 4 for enjoyment, a total of 14 if Eric and I could do math properly.
And I will tell you right now, with a 15 and a 14, Mike can give it all zeros and it still beats St. Elmo's Fire.
Don't give it all zeros. Don't give it all zeros.
Hey, it still beats St. Elmo's Fire.
So -5.
Gotta get St. Elmo's Fire back up there.
So for rarity, I wasn't familiar with Hogfather. I'm familiar with Terry Pratchett. I went to art school. There's a lot of other students that I went to school with that were familiar with him. I'm going to give it a 4. It's pretty rare, especially among non-art and literature type people. I'm going to guess that they're not familiar with Terry Pratchett at all. Theme, It was Hogswatch. I mean, it's a goose egg, right? No, I'm going 5.
I was going to say that's fighting words.
It's a different universe. I mean, enjoyment, kind of the same reasoning as Rob. Like when I first started watching it, it really kind of threw me off again with the wizards and not understanding how things were connected and not understanding how they were going to be connected in any way. Mm-hmm. And I felt like it kind of reduced my enjoyment. I feel like if I had read the book and then I came to this like a couple months later, I would have completely enjoyed it, like 5 out of 5. But I'm going to have to say, just watching it out of the gate without any other information, I'd have to give it a 4. So still really good.
Yeah. Right.
And I got our total score up there as a 42, which if you have been keeping score at home, which you don't have to because we have a scoreboard on the screen. Or if you're listening to this on the podcast, you got to be keeping score at home. Sorry, you could watch the YouTube version. This is a quick ad for the YouTube
at-home
version
players.
If you want to see our faces. We should make a printout scoreboard that you could print out, and we'll see if anyone does. But anyways, so moving on to our I put up our total scoreboard, and that puts Andrew with that 42, which is the closest we've had to a perfect score, considering we only have 3 scores so far in our history of scoring. A 42 for Andrew's pick, the Hogfather, is a very tough contender. Yeah. It is currently in the lead, knocking Rob out of the way and doubling the score that St. Elmos Fire got.
He doubled it.
He doubled it. He doubled it. We have another pick coming up in our seasonal arc here.
My goal with my pick is to just beat St. Elmos Fire.
It's not that hard.
So
it's not that hard.
We're gonna kind of stick with the death theme that Andrew started here, which I guess St. Elmo's Fire is kind of like the death of the Breakfast Club. So in a way, it's all death related. But I am picking a 1921 Swedish film called The Phantom Carriage. And it is one of our oldest, I think, films that we've viewed, and it is a silent film. So again, something completely different with title cards.
Is it the oldest? Wait, you're going to make me read this thing? No,
I'm guessing his rarity score is going to be kind of high.
I'm going for rarity and theme. And I'm going to lose on enjoyment. If he does a
real rare one, he's only 6 points off of St. Elmo's Fire. If he gets 5 out of 5 5s or 3 5s for rarity, only 6 points off there.
You're not wrong.
You're setting yourself up well.
You're not wrong. He's playing the game. Y'all are playing the game.
Playing the game.
But with it being so old, we have some good news. Eric, do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it is in the public domain, so people could put it all up all over YouTube, and ain't nobody gonna take it down for copyright reasons, for no reason, not ever. There is also a Criterion Collection DVD if you prefer the fancy physical media. And when I say fancy physical media, I'm not meaning that to all physical media, although physical media is pretty fancy. But the Criterion Collection, ooh la la, is fancy. So yeah, those are some of the ways you can get your hands on it. I think the coolest way you could get your hands on it is if you find an original reel from 1921. But I doubt anyone's going to find that, nor do I think that you have the equipment. But if you do, please share it with us, because that would be cool, and I would like to watch it on an old school reel and projector. But anyways,
with live orchestra.
Well, that's a good. Can I ask that question before we do our final wrap up? is there an official like soundtrack that we should be looking for?
I don't think
or is it just silent? Should I like put on some Slayer while I watch it or something?
I mean, you could.
Yakety sax.
But no, most. I'm gonna say most of them have music that goes with it. Same thing with like Nosferatu, which was I think released the same year or the next year, 1922. You'll probably find that there's multiple versions with different musical scores. And I don't know if there is like one true version, but
yeah. Do you have a preferred one for us to watch? Or should we go out into the world and find whatever the heck we can find? And
find what you can find. It should be just about anywhere.
Right. The Phantom Carriage starring Sylvester Stallone.
He's just gonna it's just gonna be like Sylvester Stallone dialogue as the soundtrack. Oh no, please don't do that. If that if that exists, please no. Well, it's not. But anyways, you heard it. You can pick whichever version of the Phantom Carriage you want to watch. But
I will say this, it does have a 100% Rotten Tomatoes score.
Oh, ooh la la.
So check it out.
Yeah, but what will its Rare Cuts Media Society score be?
What's the over-under?
It's gonna be above St. Elmo's Fire. And
I mean, what isn't though?
Maybe
no. I actually
with Dark House.
If the scoring existed, I'm gonna say back with the yellow wallpaper, St. Elmo's Fire might have beat the yellow wallpaper. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yellow Wallpaper, I think, was the movie was terrible. The story is excellent.
Oh,
the story that story I think is the oldest thing that we've reviewed.
That's probably true. Because it was a combo one that month. It was story and movie. Yeah. You're right.
And just so anyone that happens to be listening and made it this far in the episode,
yes,
do not watch anything that is a film version of the Yellow Wallpaper. Just read the story and be happy to not see a film and pretend like they don't exist.
Now, if someone made it this far in watching, there's a chance that they listened to and possibly watched the Yellow Wallpaper when we did it. So they're right now saying that would have been great information for me to have yesterday or like before the Yellow Wallpaper.
You owe all those people a sincere apology, Mike-R.
I do apologize. That was
yes.
I deeply regret my choice of film.
I watched like 11 versions of people's film interpretations, and I would say 90% of them were bad.
90%. Yikes. But before you join us next time on the Rare Cuts Media Society, have a happy Hogswatch night, and to all a good night.
Have a good pork pie.
Don't forget the turnips.
Flip them toenails. Hold on to them, though.
Because you don't want someone to control you.
It's true.
Visit us online at rarecutsmediasociety.com. There you can find old episodes, subscribe, or connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thanks for listening.